It's the morning of June 12th, 1962. A guard is walking the cell block of the most secure prison in America. He reaches cell 138 and calls for the prisoner to wake up. Nothing. He reaches through the bars and taps the man's head, and the head rolls off the bed and hits the floor. It's fake. Papier-mache, painted skin tones, real human hair stolen from the prison barbershop. The man who slept beneath it is gone, so are two others, and to this day nobody can prove whether they died that night, or whether they got away with it. This is the story of the only men who may have ever beaten Alcatraz. Let's go back to the beginning. Alcatraz sits on a rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing water and currents strong enough to drag a swimmer out to sea. That was the whole point. The prison was built to hold the men no other prison could. Before 1962, 36 prisoners had tried to escape. Every single one was caught, shot or drowned. Then came 3 bank robbers, Frank Morris, a career criminal with a genius-level IQ who had escaped from prisons before, and 2 brothers from Georgia, John and Clarence Anglin, who had robbed banks together and broken out of institutions together their entire lives. Alcatraz put all 3 of them on the same cell block. That was a mistake, because in 1961 one of them noticed something. The concrete around the ventilation grills at the back of each cell was old, crumbling, softened by decades of salt air, and you could dig it. So they did, night after night for months, using sharpened spoons stolen from the cafeteria and a homemade drill built from a broken vacuum cleaner motor. They timed their digging to music hour, when inmates were allowed to play instruments and the noise covered the scraping. They hid the holes behind painted cardboard panels. To anyone walking past, the cells looked completely normal. Digging out of the cell was only step 1. Behind the cell wall was an unguarded utility corridor. The men climbed it to the top of the cell block and set up a secret workshop on the roof of their own prison. And up there over months, they built everything they needed. Life vests, stitched from more than 50 stolen raincoats, a 6x14 foot inflatable raft, its seams sealed with steam from the prison pipes, wooden paddles, and the dummy heads sculpted from soap, toilet paper and concrete dust, painted with prison art kits, topped with real hair. 4 men were in on the plan: Morris, the 2 Anglin brothers, and the 4th, Alan West. On the night of June 11, 1962, they made their move. The dummy heads went onto the pillows. Morris and the Anglins slipped through the holes, climbed the corridor and gathered their gear. But in cell 140 something was going wrong. Alan West couldn't get out. He'd reinforced the edge of his hole with cement to stop it crumbling, and it had hardened. He was trapped in his own cell. By the time he finally broke through, hours later the others were gone. He climbed to the roof. Empty. His 3 partners were already on the water. They had crossed the roof, slid 50 feet down a bakery smokestack, scaled 2 barbed wire fences, and launched their raft from the northeast shore into the black water of San Francisco Bay. And then, they vanished. The next morning, the fake head hit the floor, and the biggest manhunt in the Bay Area's history began. Boats, helicopters, soldiers searching every shoreline. And what they found didn't look good for the escapees. A paddle floating in the bay, shredded raincoat material washed up on Angel Island, and a sealed rubber packet containing photographs and addresses belonging to the Anglin brothers, things no fugitive would ever willingly leave behind. The FBI's conclusion was simple. The water that night was around 10 degrees. The currents were brutal. The men drowned, and the bay swept their bodies out under the Golden Gate and into the Pacific. Case closed, right? Not quite, because no bodies were ever found, not 1 out of 3 men. And then the strange thing started. That same year, a Norwegian freighter reported seeing a body floating in the ocean beyond the Golden Gate, dressed in what looked like prison clothing. It was never recovered. Then the Anglin family started receiving things. Christmas cards, signed in handwriting the family swore belonged to John and Clarence. Unsigned roses delivered to their mother year after year. And at the mother's funeral in 1973, relatives reported 2 tall strangers in heavy makeup and beards standing quietly at the back who left without a word. Decades later, the family produced a photograph, two middle-aged men standing on a farm road, said to be taken in Brazil in 1975. A forensic facial examiner who analysed it concluded the men were more than likely the Anglin brothers. And then in 2013, a letter arrived at a San Francisco police station. It read, in effect, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. I'm 83 years old and dying of cancer." The writer claimed Frank Morris had died in 2008 and Clarence in 2011 and offered to turn himself in exchange for medical care. The FBI analysed the handwriting. The results? Inconclusive. They couldn't prove it was him. But think about what that means. They couldn't prove it wasn't. Even the escape itself holds up. Years later, engineers and television teams rebuilt the raft using the same materials and successfully paddled the route to shore. It was hard, but it was possible. The FBI officially closed the case in 1979, concluding the men most likely drowned. But the US Marshals never did. The case remains open to this day, and technically stays open until each man turns 99. Their wanted posters still exist, digitally aged just in case. So did they make it? Here's the honest answer. 3 men beat the walls, beat the guards, and beat the bay's reputation as an unswimmable death trap. The only thing nobody knows is whether they beat the water itself. Tonight, somewhere, an old case file sits in a US Marshals office, still technically active. 64 years later, because that fake head rolling onto a prison floor was never really the end of the story. Officially, it still hasn't ended.